Hey everybody, welcome to the Nerd Marketing Podcast. Today I talked to Zak Cassady-Dorion, who runs ECD Digital, or EC Digital, sorry. And we talk about some really cool edge cases and use cases for PostPilot, how it integrates with Klaviyo, how to get more out of your Klaviyo through direct mail. We lay it all out today. Hope you enjoy it. Love to just start with your backstory. I mean, you look like you're of my vintage, so I'm always curious about people. You know, how do guys like us get into e-commerce? You know?
Yeah, right. Well, I didn't have a very traditional route, and you can I'll sort of brush over things. If you want any more details, let me know.
Sure.
I spent the majority of my 20s traveling overseas. So really all over the world. And for a while I had a import-export business. I was importing textiles from Thailand, Nepal, selling them in the US. And then near the end of my 20s, I went to business school, went and got my MBA. And then I moved out to San Francisco. And this is in 2010. And I was working for a couple of tech startups while I was out there. And but this is during 2010, the financial recession. And me and two colleagues were looking to raise money for a business that we wanted to start. But if you remember, during the recession in 2010, banks weren't giving money away. VCs weren't investing in companies. And if you really weren't in New York, San Francisco, or Boston, you couldn't even get in front of a VC.
Right.
So during this whole time, we were giving money away on Kickstarter to like art related projects. And so we said to ourselves, like, well, this is kind of ridiculous. Like, if you can give money away on Kickstarter, why can't you raise debt or equity through crowdfunding? Found out why you couldn't do it really quick. And we just thought it didn't make any sense to us. So we found the law. We wrote wrote a framework that would legalize it based on the law. And then we flew to DC, started knocking on the doors in Congress, literally just walking through Congress, knocking on doors. And we got Congressman Patrick McHenry to jump on board, and we legalized equity and debt-based crowdfunding.
That's crazy.
Yeah, crazy. Then wrote the first two books ever on equity and debt-based crowdfunding investing for dummies.
So this was like pre-Angel List.
No, it's post Angel List, but so like you couldn't do equity or debt-based crowdfunding because you couldn't raise money from more than 35 unaccredited investors, and you couldn't post about a security on social media either. So those were a couple of the reasons. So like Angel's List was, I think, like you had to be an accredited investor inside of Angel's List.
Got it. Yep.
So that's how they were getting away with it. And
so you started that, and then did you ever want to come up with a crowdfunding platform?
Yeah, we did. So the law got passed, and then the government gave the SEC 9 months to implement the regulations to be able to let it go essentially. And the writing was on the wall early on. The SEC did not want this. So they dragged their feet, and it ended up taking like 3.5 years for them to finally like let open the gates so people could start doing it.
Wow.
And yeah, nuts. And so I needed an income. So I flew back to upstate New York where I'm from. An opportunity came up.
It's funny how that works.
Yeah, you needed it. Yeah, so it's like this awesome thing. So there's a lot of people making money on it now. It's like, you're welcome. But I moved on and I opened up a chain of gourmet food retail stores.
So that was a hard pivot.
Might
have been one of the hardest.
Yeah.
From equity crowdfunding to, would you say fast casual?
Gourmet food retail stores. So essentially a chain of retail stores.
Up in upstate New York.
Yeah.
Is it still there?
No, I closed those down. So I ran those for about 5 years. And so this is what got me into e-commerce. I hated the retail portion of the business, but I loved, I hated the retail portion and I hated the logistics, hated being in the retail stores. It just wasn't a fit for me and my skill set. but I've loved the e-commerce side of things. But I never had enough time to spend on the e-commerce. So I was hiring agencies to do, all the stuff that we do now. And I never had great experiences with any of the agencies. So when I closed that business down, I took what I loved from it and I left behind all the stuff that I didn't like. And I started ECD Digital Strategy. That was about 8 years ago.
And so who is E?
So ECD, e-commerce.
I'm guessing you're a CD, right?
Well, yeah, yes. But so when people, mainly if you go to the website, ECD, you see somewhere on there, e-commerce conversion demand. But what it really stands for is my wife's initials, Zak Cassady-Dorion, and the first initial of my 3 kids, Stella, Cicely, and Dakota.
Nice.
Yeah. I named it after them to make sure, I remembered why I'm doing it all.
Yeah. And so what year was that when ECD started?
2016.
And what would you say makes it different from other marketing agencies out there? So you specialize on e-com?
Yeah, I think a few things. We specialize on e-com, but more so than that, we focus on revenue producing activities only. So when we start working with a new client, or a new prospect, we put them through. It's called our blueprint to the optimized e-commerce ecosystem. And essentially what it is, it's an audit and it's a revenue audit. And so we're looking for the low hanging fruit, like the money that's being left on the table, the levers that aren't being pulled. And then we create our proposal, and we tend to side on the more conservative side. So I'll lay out all the different things that we found that could drive more revenue. And then I'll recommend the things that are going to have the highest impact and say, hey, let's start with these things, start driving more revenue. And then the additional revenue that we drive with these activities, then you can reinvest to do the other things.
And that's that's not just email specific, that's paid.
Yeah.
Email,
yes.
Maybe direct mail, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So the 3 main areas are website design and development. So everything from full website rebuilds, migrations to Shopify, or anything that's going to increase the average order value or increase the conversion rate. And then we do paid ads management on all the major platforms. And then the main area where we drive the most amount of revenue for our clients is with retention. So first step in our retention strategy is building out a full Klaviyo account with all of the flows and automations based on the specific client. And then once we have that launched, then we layer in direct mail with PostPilot. And the direct mail, the PostPilot amplifies Klaviyo. Klaviyo amplifies direct mail. It's a great fit.
Nice. And so what would you say, if you look back at all the audits you've run, well, maybe before that, what's a typical customer?
Typical customer. So I guess revenue size 1 to 20 million. It's all direct to consumer products. There's 3 main niches that we work in, just because it's just how it happens. The biggest one is the home and garden. So we do work with a lot of plant and gardening companies, and then gourmet food, specialty food, and then clothing and apparel is another big one that we work in.
And then so that you get this $10 million apparel brand or something, what would you say are your typical insights from that audit? What are most of these $1 to $20 million brands doing wrong? I don't say doing wrong, but what are they missing? Where are they leaving the most money on the table?
An under-optimized retention strategy is one of the main areas. I think we've audited, hundreds of accounts, and we've only seen a handful of Klaviyo accounts that were spot on. A small portion of our clients or a small portion of the people who we're auditing are using direct mail. That's another huge. I love seeing these this big pools of money that are being left on the table, because it's just awesome opportunity. Another big one is overspending on advertising and not really understanding the metrics. I don't like seeing that, like, customers that are, clients that are doing great, but they're just spending too much money, not getting a big enough ROAS, whether it's on Meta or on Google or wherever it is. And then websites that don't have like really good opt-in forms and pop-ups on their website for email list growth. That's huge. Navigations that are really confusing and don't make sense.
I mean, I used to do audits like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and you'd see these big brands, and you have to scroll to the bottom of the page in the footer where it's like sign up for an email, and you click and you go to like the newsletter page. It just, you guys put a pop-up on there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we do a series of 6 pop-ups depending on where you are in the buying journey and if you're on mobile or desktop. But it's fun seeing a successful brand that has all these holes in their ecosystem, because it just means it's like you can make so much money.
Yeah. I think it sounds like you approach it like I always love to, which is I start with retention first because it's the lowest hanging fruit. They've already acquired the customer. There's just, there's lifetime value there that you can optimize around, and then go up to conversion. You already get the traffic coming in. If you can convert it better, hire better customers, there's money to be made there. And acquisition, usually the last thing I would turn to, just because it's so expensive. And you've already built this net behind you. You've got a great retention net, conversion, a conversion machine. So now when you turn to driving more traffic, it's really going to have a better return.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And too, like if you can spend all the money, you can send all the traffic you want to a website, but if it's not optimized to convert, and if your retention strategies aren't in place, you're just gonna be wasting tons of money.
Yep.
So we have an optimized website that's going to make your acquisition efforts better. Same thing with retention.
So email's always been like a great place to start too, because I mean, within retention, it's typically starting with email. And I find as an agency, it's because changes to the site take time, whereas you can crack open Klaviyo or OpenSend or something and start just hacking away at flows, right? Almost immediately.
Yeah, that flows, and also most companies aren't sending near enough emails.
Sure.
And so that's usually like the first area where you can just really crank up the revenue.
So you had a post recently on LinkedIn. You put out great stuff on LinkedIn. If you're looking to optimize an email program, a lot of good email stuff there. You had one about if you had 30 days to optimize a business. Was it 30 days to optimize a business? 30
Yeah.
minutes? I think it was 30 days. But starting with that, what would you do? I mean, you got 30 days to optimize email, like within email specifically, what comes to mind?
Pop-ups, optimize the pop-ups. So we do a series of six different pop-ups depending on where people are in their buying cycle. Make sure you have a really good offer, whatever that offer is. Make sure it's good, it's enticing, and then building out those flows while the flows are being. And so the flows, you have like your standard flows, but then every company. So we have a series of 7 standard flows that we do for all companies, but then usually there'll be a couple of extra flows in there depending on like the products that they're selling. Sometimes there's really, really cool, unique cross sells and upsells that you can do. So analyzing what customers are currently buying and then creating email flows around that, and then creating a promo and sales calendar for the ongoing campaigns. Do really good segmentation. We send to the full email list for our clients, for most clients, like 4 or 5 times a year tops.
Yep.
We see a lot of companies that's just what they're doing. It's like send all, or they only send to like 180 day engage or 90 day engage. I'm always challenging my team to get more creative with their segmentation, because it's all about like getting the right message to the right person at the right time. Yeah,
Love it.
Find a little
no, it's music to my ears. So I'm guessing like one of those core 7 campaigns is probably some version of like a win back,
Yeah.
right? Like how do you think about when you go to build do you call it a win back or an anti-churn campaign, or like what comes to mind when you start digging in on a win back?
Yeah. So yeah, we call them win backs. We look at the product life cycle first. So if we're looking for timing, so like we have this one client, they're a welding company, and it's very seasonal. So like during the summer months, they buy, one main series of products. And then in the winter months, they buy another series of main products. So we'll look at what they bought, like what product line that they're buying from, and then look at what the buying cycle is for that. And then hit them up with a win back email around that time.
So what, when your work is done in Klaviyo, you're talking about 7 core flows, but I got to think there's like iterations of each one.
Yeah, and they're all. It's not the same setup for everybody.
Sure.
It's like the same 7 core flows, but they're different depending on every customer or every client. My favorite win back strategy is actually not even inside of Klaviyo. Like, so yeah, sure, we'll build out the Klaviyo flows, and that does well. But one of my favorites is with PostPilot. And how I set it up is, so we send a lot of emails for our clients. We send, 20 to 30 to 40 emails per month. And so it's a lot of emails, and we do great segmentation, but regardless of how many emails you're sending, there's going to be churn, right? Because even from your good customers, people are having a bad day or you just sent too many emails, or they got bored or whatever. But they could still be great customers. So one of my favorite win backs is looking at, but you can't, once they suppress, you can't email them anymore. So I love looking at suppressed lists that have 2x or 3 plus purchases in their lifetime, and then hitting them with a postcard to win them back. Those work great.
I love it. Get tactical. So you specifically build a segment in Klaviyo off of they've suppressed list 3 or 4 purchases, and that you find that audience is receptive to direct mail.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you're not allowed to. You can't email. Klaviyo won't let you email them because they've unsubscribed.
Right, and they love your product. They've proven that because they continually place orders, but they just don't want. At one point, they decided they didn't want your emails. But then we also bake in PostPilot into our flow, into not all of our flows, but into our abandoned carts, abandoned checkouts, and browse abandonment flows. We bake it into. So like if the cart abandonment is 7 days and they still don't purchase, then at day 10 we send them a postcard, try and get them to convert that way.
That's kind of the classic use case that we recommend. I mean, it's start with email. Obviously, if somebody abandons a cart, you're going to hit recency matters. So you're going to hit them almost immediately with some sort of reminder. Maybe a day goes by, a couple days go by, you give them an offer. 3-4 days go by, and they still haven't replied to email. You're saying trigger the postcard at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because I think most marketers, they're still like, I don't want to say they're penny pinchers, but they're just kind of like, they don't want to spend the money on a postcard. And I get it. It's a very effective channel, and you get better response rates than you get with email, but it costs more to send, obviously. Send a postcard than it does to fire off an email. So this strategy is a great one that we see a lot of Klaviyo users employing. It's like email. If they've run the gamut and they have not responded to any of those offers, fire off the postcard, and you surprisingly often get a response off the postcard where the email didn't get one.
Yeah, and it's true. It is more money, and a lot of our clients are really hesitant of it. And before we came across PostPilot, I think our first launch was like in 22. But before PostPilot, I've always been really negative on any print advertising in general, and it's not because it doesn't work, right? But it does work. But the reason why I've stayed away from it is, what I said in the beginning of what makes us unique is that we focus on trackable revenue. And one of our promises is that to our clients, the money that you spend with us more than pays for itself with increased trackable revenue.
Sure.
And when I found PostPilot, I'm like, oh man, this is awesome. So we can do direct mail and we can track it. So when I'm talking to clients, I'll often get pushback and I'll just let them know, hey, let's start with a small budget. Let's start with, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month on the postcards. And then if the ROI is there, then we can increase it. The ROI has always been there.
Yeah. It's, especially on retention, it's like, it always works. It will always, it's like email will always, it's if you build that segment right or that target right, and retention is where we all feel comfortable sort of guaranteeing an ROI there. We see that's where the brands have the highest returns.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And I think when you talk about how you figure out attribution, I mean, first for the brand in particular, they shouldn't care whether the message is going out via email, via postcard, via like a billboard. Like as long as there's an ROI on it, who cares what medium it goes through, right? But how do you think about attribution? Like how are you, when you get pushback on whether direct mail works or not, how are you showing them the attribution?
Showing them the numbers. I mean, the numbers are there. The data's there. We sent postcards to these people. These people purchased. These people used the promo code. The only place that this promo code existed was in the postcards that we sent out.
Yeah.
Try and show that very clearly.
We find a lot of brands, they try to get really sort of granular on that. They'll either focus in on QR code scans or coupon redemptions is another one. But those really, I think they undersell the channel. From what we've seen, maybe 5% of people scan the QR, but so it doesn't really capture the full impact of the promo. Like if I see the card and I load up the website and I didn't scan the QR, I still responded to the promo,
Yeah.
And amazingly, the same thing happens with coupon codes. You can put the coupon code on your homepage and at the header of every page, and you'll still have people who check out and not redeem it.
Yes.
So it's like you can't really focus on that either.
Like the old marketing adage was you have to see a brand 7 times before you make a purchase.
Sure.
And when I talk with clients about attribution, one of the things that I talk about just in attribution for e-commerce in general is you have to understand that it's not crystal clear where sales are coming from. Meaning you can all the platforms are going to be trying to claim like the credit for each sale, but in actuality, every platform that touched them had something to do with the sale. So here's a really great example that happened to me a few months ago. So I was, and it had to do with PostPilot. So I was shopping. I was going away with my wife to Colombia for a few days, and I was shopping for a new bathing suit. And I went on this website. I was looking at the products, didn't add them to the cart, but I was browsing. I'd purchased that from there before, and I said, I got busy or whatever it was, and I just left. A couple of days later, a postcard showed up at my house. I was like, oh, this is awesome. I know how they did this. So I still didn't purchase, but I just saw the postcard. I left it on the kitchen counter. My birthday was coming up. I didn't say anything to my wife about it. I left it on the kitchen counter because I was going to at some point I was going to make the purchase. I just didn't have time. Then on my birthday, right before we went to Colombia, I realized I didn't have time to order the shorts, or I forgot to order the shorts. But then I got 3 pairs of the shorts that my wife ordered from the postcard that I left on the kitchen counter. Like that attribution, right? Like she purchased with her email address. So, none of that attribution got back to the postcard, but it was 100% because of the postcard that purchase was made.
Also, great wife, right?
Great wife.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, it's like, I'm just, if you can imagine that the nightmare we have of trying to sort out attribution in this, because initially we would see Well, the first thing we'd see is like we'd send a postcard to a household, or an address, and we'd see orders come in off that postcard. We'd use unique coupon codes, orders being redeemed for someone that we didn't know was in the household, right? Like just your wife, for example, off of your promo code. So that started happening. We had to account for that in the attribution model. And then there's New York City, and there's like weird apartment numbers and things come, like the address, like would come in with different apartment buildings and things at the same address. And then the last part was the attribution window for direct mail is really long. It's, it's not like an email where you send it out and 48 hours later, you've kind of seen the traffic trickle off. No, it's months, like people will put the catalog in the bathroom, and people read it in there, and then they order off at 90 days, 108 days after you've sent it out. So that's always another different, unique thing for the channel is like you see these really long attribution windows.
And if you think about it, it makes sense. Like email, you get an email, most people aren't saving emails in their inbox, so they're not going back to those emails, after a week or 2 weeks. But the postcards, you just leave them around, right? You don't get a ton of postcards, period. Not like used to happen 20 years ago.
Right.
So, and if it's a postcard from a brand that you like, they're highlighting really nice products, like it just gets left around. And then you're constantly looking. Every time I walked through the kitchen, I was thinking about that brand.
Yeah. We put them on the fridge. I've got them on my desk here, obviously, because I work at PostPilot. I've got a zillion. But, one thing that we just say is like at the end of the day, if the brand is sending enough volume, there's no better test than like a holdout group, where you can, I don't know if you've used this functionality, but you can say if you've got an audience of one-time buyers who haven't purchased in 90 days, you can say like, let's carve out 20% of that, and they're not going to get the campaign. The other 80% will get the campaign, and you compare the two groups. Both see your meta ads, both get your emails, both see your Super Bowl ad, whatever. The only thing you can attribute the lift to is the direct mail campaign. Yeah. So that's something we, if you've got a skeptical brand, we always recommend like, you need enough volume to actually carve out a holdout group. I probably wouldn't do it if you're sending 10 cards out, but
I love that. That's great. Yeah, because there's the only difference right here is these guys received the postcards and these guys did not. Right.
And that's how you get an incrementality. It's really something that any marketing software should, I wish as a marketer that everybody did it. I wish that you could dial it in Meta, and do control group testing. But I think to your earlier point, everybody, tries to take as much credit as possible for their channel. So, I don't know, direct mail kind of gets held to a higher standard just because I feel like that's where control group testing kind of started in marketing, and it's easy to implement, but yeah, worth a try.
I like it. Yeah. I'm going to try that with a couple clients.
Cool. Well, Zach, how can people get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me at our website, ecdigitalstrategy.com, and really active on LinkedIn. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. And my email, zach@ecdigitalstrategy.com.
That's great. And, you do put out some of the best content, especially around email and personalization and stuff on LinkedIn. So I would encourage everybody to follow you there. It's great stuff.
Awesome, Drew. Drew, it's great chatting with you today.
Great chatting with you, man. I really appreciate you taking the time.